أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين، روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the hastening and the return of our Imam, please recite the salawat. For his protection and well-being, recite the second one louder. Inshallah, each and every one of us becomes a true and close companion of our beloved Imam. Recite the third one even louder. We've been trying over the course of these nights to come to a better understanding with regards to what Imam al-Hussain was trying to do, in order to understand what our purpose is as Shia, as a group of people who consider themselves the party of the Ahlulbayt, meaning that they are coming together with an objective that they are trying to accomplish, not something that they will do in the future, something that they are doing today, we should be doing today. And one of the first steps towards becoming active in this way is a better understanding of what the Ahlul Bayt were trying to do, what Imam al-Hussain was trying to do, what he set out to accomplish, what he told his companions to do. And if we understand that better, we can understand our role today. Therefore, we started with the Holy Prophet, and we're discussing Amirul Mu'mineen, and we will get to Imam al-Mujtaba and Imam al-Hussain to see what this movement has been from the beginning of it until the movement of Imam al-Hussain particularly. Now recite the salawat, please. We divided up the life of Amirul Mu'mineen as an Imam after the demise of the Holy Prophet into three different segments. One of them was the Saqifah, the event of appointing a Khalifa after the Holy Prophet, which was a short period within the 25 years before Amirul Mu'mineen came to become the leader and the ruler. But it was a very important piece of history. And I'd like to put in this point that what we're saying is really in a nutshell, although it's taking long, but this is still in a nutshell. I strongly advise and recommend brothers and sisters to read on their own the details, see for themselves with more detail. That was a very important segment in history. We tried to talk about it a bit. Then we discussed the 25 years, the rest of the 25 years before the Imam came to power as the Khalifa. And we pretty much came to an end of that. I just want to discuss very briefly that moment, or that very brief part of history where the third Khalifa was revolted against and people pledged allegiance to Amirul Mu'mineen. Salamullah alayhi. With all the corruption that we try to mention just a few examples in the previous session, naturally what happens is that you have a group of people that are going to be privileged, you will have a group of people that are going to be well off, and you will have many others that are not going to be well off. You will have many others that have been deprived. In the end, you'll have to take something from somewhere, from some people, and give it over to the privileged. Okay, so some people are missing out here. The people that had been neglected over this time, people who had been oppressed, one group of people, and also some of the stronger believers, some of those companions of the Holy Prophet, or even some of the tabi'een that really believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They believed in the message of the Holy Prophet. They started seeing there's too much corruption and there's no end to this. Things keep becoming worse and worse and worse. This caused for the people to revolt. The rebellion against Uthman was led from two different fronts. One front was Kufa. Kufa was a very important city, one of the largest cities of that time. From a political perspective, in terms of the economics of that region, and also in terms of the presence of important figures, whether they were companions of the Holy Prophet or the tabi'een that had been trained by the companions of the Holy Prophet. It was an important region. Let me say this as well, that Kufa was actually a city built at that time, the time of the second Khalifa. And it was different people, different tribes that had come to that part of the Muslim empire to defeat the Persians that set up that city. One of the most important factions within the city are the Yemenis, those who've come from Yemen and settled in that region. They were very important figures and important individuals. In fact, it's interesting to know that these Yemenis, who were actually, many of them, not all of them, but many of them were closer and stronger supporters of Amirul Mu'mineen than many others. Even later on, during the time of the later Imams, the Yemenis were the ones that from Kufa moved to some of the other parts of the Muslim world and established Shia thought. One family amongst these Yemeni families and tribes is the Ash'ari tribe. They were the ones that took Shi'ism to Qum. All of what we have Shi'ism today in Qum is because of the individuals within the Ash'ari tribe from Kufa that were Shia that moved to Qum and made that a Shia city. That became a stronghold of the Shia. There are a number of tribes that are in Kufa. A number of individuals within these tribes that are very important figures. Led by some of these important individuals, including Malik al-Ashtar, Malik ibn al-Harith al-Nakha'i. The people of Kufa have a rebellion against Uthman. They come over to Medina, they voice their opinion, they object to Uthman, they say enough is enough. And it's a long story what all they said and what they heard. They were not satisfied. This is one front. The other faction that came and revolted against Uthman are the believers that were in Egypt. Egypt at that time was an important front. The believers had opened up that front and added it to the Islamic empire from the Romans. It was part of the Roman Empire. And the believers were still at war and fighting over there in that part of the Muslim empire with the Romans. They had different battles over there. So some of the companions of the Holy Prophet were still there and they were fighting the Romans. When they saw what was going on, and again they saw things were getting worse and worse and worse, they sat down and they talked amongst themselves and they said, look, we cannot allow this to happen to the ummah of the Holy Prophet. So the difference between, one difference that I found between the Egyptian rebellion against Uthman, which are actually the figures that come as part of this rebellion from Egypt, are not necessarily Egyptians themselves. They were, many of them at least, were companions of the Holy Prophet from Hijaz, from that part of the world. They had just been there because of the wars that they had with the Romans in that part of the world. But the reasons why they rebelled and they revolted against Uthman were purely religious, purely Islamic. As for the Kufans, except for a few, including Malik ibn Harith al-Ashtar, some of them, their motives, their intentions, the reasons why they gathered, they accompanied others for this rebellion, was not just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was also partially because they were some of those who had been deprived. A third front, if we can call it that joined the rebellion. They were not the ones that led the rebellion, but they joined the rebellion, were some of the companions of the Holy Prophet that were in Medina. Talha is one of them. Zubayr, it's not clear if he was there as part of the rebellion in the end. He didn't disagree with that, but he didn't really want to take part in a rebellion against the Khalifa in that way. Because these guys were there to kill. They had serious intentions and they were not willing to compromise. So basically, the point that I'm trying to raise is understanding a couple of points. One, there's a rebellion. The Muslim Ummah revolted against Uthman because of his deviation from the path of the Holy Prophet and all the misdoings and the wrongdoings of Uthman. Led by who? Led by the companions of the Holy Prophet or the students of the companions of the Holy Prophet. The people who were mistreated during this time, they also joined. That motive was there as well. And you have those that it's not clear at this point. We'll realize what their motives were. People like Talha that joined this, that had a slightly different reason for joining. Another thing that needs to be mentioned with regards to that is pretty much everyone, even those who were maybe somewhat privileged compared to others, they were also dissatisfied with Uthman. He was just doing too many wrong things. The wife of the Holy Prophet, Aisha, she was one of the ones that was bad-mouthing Uthman all the time. And there's a famous quote of her telling people that they should kill Uthman because of what he has done. This happens. They rebel against Uthman. They go and they kill Uthman against the will of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen did not participate in that. He did not even approve of it, the killing of Uthman. Although, whether he accepted it or he thought it was legitimate or not is a different point, but he wasn't part of that. He didn't encourage people. He even told people not to. He even sent his sons to protect Uthman and deliver water to Uthman. Okay? This is one of those things they say in Karbala. The Yazidis said the reason why we cut off the water is because you all cut off water from Uthman. They cut off water from Uthman. They were the ones that took water to Uthman. And that's the way they were treated in Karbala. So anyhow, this is the rebellion. They kill Uthman. They come to Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah alayh for bay'ah. The bay'ah for Amir al-Mu'mineen is very interesting, brothers and sisters. It's important for us to compare. We know initially that the Holy Prophet appointed Amirul Mu'mineen as the Khalifa. No question about it. Very clear. People didn't accept. People didn't support him. Because the support was not there, Amirul Mu'mineen didn't move forward with it. He didn't take out the sword. It wasn't the right thing to do. The first Khalifa, people pledged allegiance. How did the people pledge allegiance to the first Khalifa? I want to compare the pledge of allegiance. It's important. I want to extract a point from this. The people in Saqifa pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr because there was a rivalry between Aus and Khazraj. And Khazraj set out Sa'd ibn Ubadah, who was their chief in a sense, the head of their tribe. And Aus didn't like that. One of the influential figures in Aus was jealous of Sa'd ibn Ubadah. When he saw that he cannot compete with Sa'd ibn Ubadah, when those three individuals that we mentioned before, including Abu Bakr, came over to Saqifa, and they started talking about pledging allegiance to Abu Bakr, and Umar pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr, this person out of jealousy came and pledged allegiance with Abu Bakr, and he had Aus. Because of tribalism that remained in these people, they came and also pledged allegiance with Abu Bakr, not because they considered him someone worthy, not because they were pleased with this. And then as a group they came out, they started asking people to pledge allegiance, telling people actually, and sometimes being pretty violent about taking that allegiance from people. And sometimes very violently, which I don't want to get into the story, where they had Amirul Mu'mineen come pledge allegiance. They forced him to come to the masjid. This is the way they pledged allegiance for the first Khalifa. When the first Khalifa passed away, he had it written that it is Umar ibn Khattab that's going to become the next Khalifa. It's going to rule after him. There's also some ambiguities in history with regards to how that exactly happened. Right? We don't want to be conspiracy theorists, but it's good to read history and think how things happen. There are some questions as to how that happened. Anyway, what ended up happening was that this came out, that Abu Bakr has told people to pledge allegiance to Umar ibn Khattab. He came out with, now he was known, let me put this in there, that from the beginning Abu Bakr and Umar were together. It was Umar that constantly supported Abu Bakr in that allegiance, and he had a lot of authority and power. A lot of the decisions that were made were based on Umar. So he already has influence. He already has a lot of people afraid of him. People came and pledged allegiance because that was what the previous Khalifa had said, and nobody objected to that seriously in the way they did with regards to the saying of the Holy Prophet. But people did voice their opinion and them not liking this individual as the Khalifa. Many people said, we're afraid of you. And the first statements that he made supposedly as a Khalifa were pretty strong words. He didn't say much about the taqwa of Allah, remembrance of Allah, piety, justice. He talked about the lash. And people need to get in line. Paraphrasing that part of history. So this is the allegiance that is made and pledged to the second Khalifa, based on the saying of Abu Bakr, because he already had a certain level of authority and power, and people were listening to him, the commanders were listening to him, nobody dared say otherwise. And obviously Amirul Mu'mineen didn't have his supporters. If he had, he would have become the Khalifa at the beginning. He didn't have supporters. And so people just went ahead and pledged allegiance. With regards to Uthman, there was a shura. Okay. There was a shura. So let me go back to a thing again. Abu Bakr was not based on the willingness of the people. The second Khalifa, nobody suggested him. The first Khalifa appointed him, and others just remained silent, they just pledged allegiance. The third Khalifa, when Umar ibn Khattab passed away, he set this shura up of 6 people. We already talked about this briefly. And within that shura, Amir al-Mu'mineen had Zubayr with him. In other words, Zubayr was going to vote for Amir al-Mu'mineen. Uthman had one individual with him as well, and then there were 2 others. What ended up happening is that the one that Umar ibn Khattab had appointed and said, if the 6 of you agree upon one of you becoming the Khalifa, then so be it, great, and there shouldn't be any difference. If there's any disagreement, whoever disagrees is going to be beheaded. Okay. Whoever does not agree should be killed. If you don't come to an agreement, all of you should be killed. So he threatened all of them, and he said if there is a tie, whoever that individual, which I forget his name at this point, he was supposed to be the tiebreaker. Anyhow, doesn't matter what the individual's name is. The idea is that this shura came out with disagreement in the end, and because of all the threats of the second Khalifa, when they appointed Uthman, people pledged allegiance to Uthman just because of the second Khalifa. He was not suggested by people. People voiced their opinions right there. People like Ammar ibn Yasir and others said that Amir al-Mu'mineen should have become the Khalifa, but their voices weren't heard. When it comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen, however, things are very different. There's no previous Khalifa telling people to pledge allegiance to Amir al-Mu'mineen. There's no shura. There's none of that going on. People in masses come to the door of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi, and they beg him to lead them. What do we mean by people? This is why understanding that rebellion was also important. In Medina now, you have the Sahabi or the Ashab of the Holy Prophet from Kufa that have come. From Iraq, some of the main figures are there in Medina. The Tabi'een that are important are there in Medina. The Ashab from Egypt that were fighting are there in Medina. And the Ashab who are in Medina are there. So you have a very, very good representation from the most influential and important parts of the Muslim empire. All these are gathered there, and all of them pretty much support the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and they go to him and they beg him to lead. One of the points that Amir al-Mu'mineen constantly makes is this, that you all came to me and I told you I don't want to lead. I don't want to be the Khalifa. Allow me to be as I was before. I, as a wazir, according to his own words, as they have been reported, am better for you than as a Khalifa. I prefer that. He kept saying, no, I don't want this. They kept saying, no, we will not agree with anyone else other than Ali ibn Abi Talib, salamullah alayhi. There are even times in that history that some people suggested, they went to the Ashab. They went to the Ashab of the Holy Prophet and they told them, you all are the Ashab of the Holy Prophet. We trust you all appoint someone. Then voices were heard, cries were heard from outside and everybody else, other than the few individuals that supported this idea. They said, no, the only one we want is Amirul Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib. Okay. Why is this important? There's a question that exists and a misunderstanding that exists that I want to briefly address and allow you all to ponder upon it and think about it and follow up on it. I think I mentioned this idea briefly in passing before in these series as well. The idea that the people are the ones that are supposed to be supporting their governor, their ruler, and agreeing to him and wanting him, which is referred to as democracy. What is Islam's stance on this? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say with regards to this? One way that this is discussed is the following. They say, okay, the West, Europe and America have come up with the idea of democracy, of course, following some ancient government supposedly in some part of Western Europe called Greece. Okay, they say there was somewhat of a democracy there, supposedly, or a republic, to be more specific, more accurate. And then now these countries have taken this concept and they have implemented it. And you see all of what you see in the West as a result of this form of government. And now the West, the United States of America particularly, thinks that their form of government is so good they want to export it to other parts of the world by force. And then we ask, or they ask us, why don't you guys accept democracy? We want to bring democracy to you. Is this how it's supposed to be understood? Some Muslims also take it in the same light as well. They come and say, oh, we have got to take democracy from the West. What I want to say is briefly, this is itself a very, very in-depth discussion that requires many sessions, which cannot be just lectures like this. They have to be, it has to be in the form of a class, all right, where we can go back and forth, evidence can be shown. I will mention this for a reason. I want to mention one particular scholar that has given this opinion, which is something that can be seen in the verses in the ahadith, but it's important for me to mention the scholar for a reason. Before I mention the scholar, let me put the idea forth, and then we'll see who the scholar who said this is. It is an understanding of some of the ulama, which seems to be pretty accurate, that democracy, the real rule of the people, for the people and by the people, for the benefit of the people, and using the people themselves to govern. And people means people, all right? Not an oligarchy where you have a certain class of people ruling. People, just people. Anyone that is capable of managing, even if they come from a very poor background, for example. This idea is actually a divine concept that was implemented first by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa and by Amirul Mu'mineen afterwards. And it was because of their teachings that was to a certain extent implemented. The idea at least existed amongst the Muslims to a certain extent, the idea of bay'ah. Okay, that was not something that was present in the West at the time. The emperors didn't even have the idea of bay'ah. Forget about the bay'ah being like the bay'ah of Abu Bakr or the bay'ah of Umar ibn Khattab. They just didn't even have the idea of bay'ah in the first place. Okay? So even though it was somewhat deviated, the teaching of the Holy Prophet, it existed amongst the Muslims. And then this idea, this thought, because of the teachings of the Holy Prophet and the Ahlulbayt, was something that became prevalent in the world and later on started to be seen in the West. Of course, a deviated version of it. Something that looks like a democracy but isn't a true democracy. Again, the details of this discussion I'll leave. I want you guys to think about this. Who is the scholar that presents this idea? It's a scholar that is accused of believing in something which is considered completely contrary to democracy. Okay, which is completely wrong. That's not the case. So Ayatollah Khamenei, okay, he is the idea of democracy is actually an Islamic concept. It's a divine one, taught and practiced and implemented by the Prophet, and this is an Islamic model. But the West isn't really implementing democracy. We firmly believe in this. And I encourage everybody to follow this idea. Let's not allow our principles to be hijacked by others and then implemented in an incorrect way and presented to the whole world, and then they say, okay, this is democracy, and our version of liberal democracy has got to be implemented in the Muslim world as well. No, no, no. We believe in an Islamic democracy, not a liberal democracy. This is the bay'ah of Amirul Mu'mineen, salamullah alayhi. After the bay'ah, what is the Imam going to do? Obviously, Amirul Mu'mineen is the continuation of the line of thought and the practice and the sunnah of the Holy Prophet. He is the one that is most knowledgeable of the book of God and the sunnah of the Holy Prophet, and he's going to be implementing it. So, whatever we saw during the time of the Holy Prophet, we should be seeing during the time of Amirul Mu'mineen. That includes two things. It includes catering to the believers that are currently believers that are already within the realms of Islam, believers that are already somewhat practicing. He has to cater to them, but also to look outside as well, to start bringing more people into Islam. That which was happening to an extent in ways that were not 100% based on prophetic teachings, but the idea of expansion was a prophetic teaching. As we just said, some of those who revolted against Uthman were some of the companions of the Holy Prophet that were over there fighting the kuffar in Egypt. Expansion. So Amir al-Mu'mineen should be doing the same thing. However, what happens is, the first thing Amir al-Mu'mineen has to do is take care of the affairs of the believers within the Muslim empire before he looks towards expansion. And this is what takes up all the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and we don't see him moving towards expansion because all his energy, all his efforts have got to be taken by the believers that are already there to be corrected. What did Amir al-Mu'mineen do? Recite a salawat, please. He had to correct many of the wrong that had become culture at that time. He had to correct it. One was with regards to the economic privileges that certain people had. We already mentioned certain people received loads of money without it being rightfully theirs. Out of the wealth and the income of the Muslims and the believers, some people got loads, others got nothing. Amirul Mu'mineen corrected this, one of the first things he did, and this is what upset a lot of people. He went to the Baytul Mal, he made an announcement, he said, look, the way this was distributed before is wrong. I'm going to be distributing it the way the Holy Prophet distributed it. Everybody is equal in this. So people lined up and he started giving people 3 dinars each. Only 3. They used to get, some of them, thousands of dinar. Now it's not the case. 3 dinar each. They lined up. Someone who used to be the master of this other individual and that other individual was the slave are lined up in the same line and they're each given 3 dinar. Obviously the privileged people at the time of the Uthman, when they see this, they start objecting. The remnants of the Umayyads in Medina, they start objecting. Walid ibn Uqba is one of them. He speaks out. He says, Ya Ali, you killed our fathers in the battle of Badr. And now you're depriving us of what Uthman used to give us. Others spoke out as well against this doing of Amirul Mu'mineen. Obviously Amirul Mu'mineen is not going to change course. So this is how it is because this is the way the Holy Prophet did it. I'm not going to change anything the Holy Prophet did it. Whatever happened beforehand is going to be revoked. And what we will do is what the Holy Prophet did. Even the money that has already been given out is going to be taken back and distributed justly, according to the teaching of the Holy Prophet. This is one thing he did. Another thing he did was with regards to the other corruption that Uthman created, which was the umara, the wulat, the governors. People who were not qualified to lead the Muslims, lead the believers, were set in very key and important positions. Many people came to Amirul Mu'mineen, or at least a few that have been recorded in history, came to Amirul Mu'mineen and they spoke to him. One of them is Ibn Abbas. There's others as well. They come to Amirul Mu'mineen, they say, Ya Ali, your government hasn't strengthened yet. Okay, we're still in the process of strengthening the establishment of your government. We still don't have that yet. So for the time being, allow the governors that Uthman has set for these different regions to remain where they are. When we get our act together and we're on top of things, we have that control, then we'll go at them one by one. Amir Mu'min said no. Not even for a day. They said, okay, if you don't want to do that for all of them, at least for Muawiyah do this. Amir Mu'min said, I'm not going to do that even for Muawiyah. Not even for a day. This is important. Who did Amirul Mu'mineen appoint? Their names are not important. I don't want to get into the names. What I do want to get into is this. The Imam coming to power, the Imam becoming the ruler after a time, 25 years of not being the ruler, is very similar, brothers and sisters, to the ghaibah of our Imam. Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. Many times people ask, you hear about 313 loyal companions of the Imam. People that will be with the Imam and he will lead his revolution with these individuals. And many times people ask, okay, what are their qualities? How can we become one of them? And it's something to want to become. How do we become that? If we want to understand who the Imam is going to appoint, we have to look at who Amirul Mu'mineen appointed. what he focused on. This is the way we can figure that out, right? One thing let me say about that, the 313. Some people, first of all, think that the Imam needs to have 313 strong companions before he starts his movement, and the fact that we have not had his movement begin up to today means we have not had 313 people that fit the criteria. This doesn't seem to be an accurate understanding. It seems, at least the way I understand it, that most of, if not all of, the 313 companions of the Imam are going to be of those that are living at that time. Not that he's going to bring most of them from the past. People who've passed away ages ago are going to be brought back to life. That doesn't seem to be the case, that at least the majority of them being of such people. It doesn't seem to be the case. Seems like it's going to be from those people. The other thing is, it's not like the Imam is waiting for there to be 313 people at once and that's it. And therefore we can conclude that we have never had 313 real believers that fit the criteria of the Imam living at the same time. So if you look at Qum, and some people take it to this extent as well. They say, well, if you look at the Hawza in Qum and in Najaf, then there are more than 313 people there. That means something, right? What it doesn't mean is that all these people are bad people. That's for sure. Okay. But what I want to put in there is, it's not only 313 people that the Imam wants. There's got to be loads of other things that happen as well. But we should shoot to become the best of the best. What is it that's most important in the eyes of Amirul Mu'mineen? So we can know that that is what is most important in the eyes of the Imam of our time as well. It's pretty simple to say, but very difficult to do. That is real taqwa. Real taqwa. Someone who is willing to deprive themselves of privileges even in order to help the people and make sure justice is implemented. This is something that we need to work on. So Amirul Mu'mineen changes the umara. He puts the pious umara, most of them. Some of them are kept where they were. Very few, but most of them are changed. Some of them are suggested by the people that they later on regretted, like Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was the one that was suggested by Malik al-Ashtar to rule over Kufa. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, okay. So the other thing he tried to correct was changing the umara. He changed most of them, but some of them he wasn't able to do. Obviously, Muawiyah being one of them. Recite salawat, please. One of the other things he does, Amirul Mu'mineen does, is he tries to, from day one, with the first speech, with the first lecture, he tries to bring the spirit of Islam and Iman and faith and doing things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala back into society. When we look at the first lectures that the previous Khulafa gave, none of them talked about this. There was a hamd, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that was there, but they didn't speak in a way that they encouraged people to abide by the rules of piety, to observe the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reminding them of paradise and hell. Amirul Mu'mineen from day one he does that, and he continues that. All of the du'as that you hear from the Imam, du'a'u Kumail ibn Ziyad al-Nakha'i, was one of the companions of the Imam, and the other du'as of the Imam, they are taught during this period. Okay. He wants to bring faith back into society. So their motivation, their taste buds, which had changed, as we mentioned, he wants to bring them back to what they should be. Doing things and being motivated for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is overall what the Imam wants to do. But as we did with the Holy Prophet and also with Amir al-Mu'mineen during the 25 years prior to this, we want to see who the friends and the enemies of the Imam are. Who the friends and the enemies of the Imam are. There are three major enemies that the Imam has during this time. One of these enemies, which is the toughest enemy in one sense, the one which is the source of all the problems during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, is that line of nifaq that we talked about, the kufr, which was displayed to be and portrayed to be faith, complete kufr in the Umayyads. Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan represents this line. This enemy is represented by Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. This is the most difficult enemy of the Imam in a sense, okay? Each of them is very difficult to battle and combat. But this enemy of the Imam is most devastating. Why? Because the other two enemies of the Imam are also enemies because of this enemy, the shirk. The second enemy that the Imam deals with is that hawa'un nafs, the taste buds that had changed. The taste buds of the companions of the Prophet, the tabi'een, the pious, the supposedly pious people had changed. That's one enemy. This enemy represents itself in Talha and Zubayr and the first battle, the battle of Jamal. And the last enemy of the Imam is the enemy that we can call it one of two terms. On one hand, we can call it jahl, ignorance. Also, we can call it something that Amir al-Mu'mineen called it himself. The absence of basira. Okay. The absence of basira. This is represented in the battle of Nahrawan and the Khawarij. I'll explain what that means. Right now, just take the word jahl and ignorance from me. I'll explain further what that adamul basar or basira means when we talk about the Khawarij. But the shirk, the enemy which represents itself in the form of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, is the most serious enemy of the Imam because he is the one that instigates the other two. Muawiyah is the one that plays on the hawa'un nafs of the first group, Talha and Zubayr. And he is the one that plays on the third group as well. He causes them to get confused and he pushes them to become the Khawarij that they become. That's why the main enemy of the Imam is this kufr that is covered with a layer of apparent faith, which is not real, it's superficial. And the other two are also problematic, but they follow this one. The shirk being the enemy of the Imam is pretty clear. But let me explain what this enemy of the Imam has done, briefly. First of all, when Uthman was besieged, when the people were attacking Uthman, when there was a rebellion against Uthman, what Uthman did was that he wrote a letter to Muawiyah to send some troops to support him in Medina. Muawiyah sent his troops. He sent his troops, however, he told them to settle outside of Medina until things become clear. and we know what to do. I don't have strong evidence to prove this, but it's at least a question. Why didn't this army enter Medina and support Uthman? That part of history, I saw a few different accounts of what actually happened. But some of the accounts suggest that they were there, they were aware of what was going on, but they didn't get involved. I tend to prefer that a bit more. And then what I want to take from it is Muawiyah was not just ruling over Sham as the governor of Umar and then Uthman, just being a nice guy to them, representing them, and trying to do a good job as a governor of Sham for them. That wasn't the case. The line of shirk from the time of Abu Sufyan himself and then his children was to get back at the Holy Prophet and take over the authority that was taken away from them by the Holy Prophet. They were the rulers of Arabia. Of course, a much smaller Arabia at their time, but they were the rulers. They were on top of things. They didn't like the idea that the Holy Prophet had now become the ruler and everybody loves him. His name is being called in the masjid, in the adhan. Everybody is testifying to his risala. They never liked that idea. That was the biggest problem they had with the Holy Prophet. If the Holy Prophet would have said, we believe in what we have, but you can rule. You be our ruler. They would have said, okay. Now, the problem they had was that the Holy Prophet wasn't going to do that. So Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan was always looking to become that ruler. That's what he was working for. It seems like when he saw this opportunity, he jumped on it. He didn't even want to help Uthman because he wanted to be the Khalifa. He was waiting for the news of the death of Uthman to arrive. As soon as the news came to Sham, Muawiyah received the news before Amir al-Mu'mineen sent the letters. Right from the start, he didn't even tell the people of what happened and people have pledged allegiance with Ali ibn Abi Talib. He didn't even discuss that. What he was keen on saying, and in one of the first lectures he gave after that, was that he told the people the following. He said, people, I have been assigned, or I had been assigned, to rule over you in this part of the world by Umar ibn Khattab, and after him by Uthman. And now they have killed Uthman, and I want you to join me to go and avenge the blood of Uthman. This is how he presented what happened in Medina. From the get-go, from the start. This is how he presents it. But what he does, in order to be able to accomplish that goal, to become that ruler, what he does is he wants to get the supporters of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the people in the region which is not controlled by him outside of Sham, he wants to get them to rebel against Amir al-Mu'mineen. He sees and he knows that the people who are with Amir al-Mu'mineen, if they all come together to fight Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, there's no chance for him to win that battle. So what he does is that he wants to divide people up and create rebellion within the regions that are currently being controlled by Amir al-Mu'mineen, to have them fight each other and try to get rid of Ali ibn Abi Talib in that way first. And for him not to even have to fight him. So what he does, he starts writing letters to loads of different people. The Umayyads, well, the Umayyads were already with him. He didn't have to convince them. But he did write letters to them, telling them and instructing them what to do. But he also wrote letters to others, including Talha and Zubayr. The letters are available. They have been recorded in history. These letters are very interesting. He plays with that hawa'un nafs, that has become very strong in these individuals. Zubayr is someone who supported Amir al-Mu'mineen after the Holy Prophet. We didn't mention his name, but it is recorded in history. He was one of the people that was pretty hot on supporting Amir al-Mu'mineen. And as we said in that shura after the death of Umar ibn Khattab, Zubayr was going to vote for Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he did vote for Amir al-Mu'mineen. However, during the time of Uthman, all of the wealth that accumulated for him, and he was given the privileges that he was given, that poisoned him. Now his nafs was in control. Muawiyah played with that. He wrote him a letter. In the letter, it's amazing. This shaitan, in the letter, he addresses Zubayr. He says, Ila Abdullah Zubayr Amir al-Mu'mineen. Okay. That's interesting. He calls him Amir al-Mu'mineen. He knows that he wants to be. He showed signs, and Muawiyah was aware of this, that he wouldn't mind being the Khalifa himself. So Muawiyah writes that in the letter. He says, Ila Abdullah Zubayr Amir al-Mu'mineen. Then he says, I have taken the people of Sham to pledge allegiance to you. Rise, and so on and so forth. He writes another letter to Talha. These are important, brothers and sisters, for us to note. He writes a letter to Talha. In the letter to Talha, you know what he tells him? He says, Zubayr is no better than you. He writes in the letter of Zubayr, you're Amir al-Mu'mineen. In this letter he says, Zubayr is no better than you. Why don't you do something? The Muslims need you, and so on and so forth. He encourages them to revolt. Then when they rebel against Amir al-Mu'mineen, they don't come out and tell the people, they'll never come out like this. Okay, they'll never come out like this. Someone who likes to lead, someone who wants that position, and they want to come and speak to the Muslims, they're not going to come out and say, hey people, I want you guys to vote for me. I have this desire to rule over you. They're not going to come out and say anything like that. No one's going to follow them. They came out and said that we want to avenge the blood of Uthman. Uthman was killed unjustly. Uthman is killed unjustly. We want the murderers of Uthman to bring them to justice. This is what they started off on. Now, Talha was one of the ones that was present, definitely there when they killed Uthman. But now he's using this as an excuse. There's a lesson to draw from this, but I'll leave it for the following session as our time has come to an end. Keep this in your mind. The story, the way that these individuals portrayed what they were trying to do. Sallallahu alayka ya Abu Abdullah. Assalamu alaykum ya Ahlulbayt وموضع الرسالة ومختلف الملائكة ومعادن الرحمن وخزان العلم ومنتهى الخير May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you, my beloved Holy Prophet and the Ahlulbayt. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you. It was in your homes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with guidance and revelation. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you. Angels descend upon you day in and day out, seeking permission before entering upon you. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, sallallahu alayka ya Madlum, sallallahu alayk ayyuha ash-shaheed bikarbala ghatshana. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you, my beloved Imam Al-Hussain. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you, my beloved oppressed Imam, the Imam that was slaughtered by the shores of the Euphrates while his mouth was dry of thirst. Sallallahu alayhi. Brothers and sisters, let's take our hearts to Karbala. Tonight is the night of the 7th of Muharram. Do you know what happens on the 7th of Muharram? It is on the 7th of Muharram that they cut off the water from the tents of Abu Abdullah Al-Hussain. From the 7th onwards, you'll start hearing the sound of wa'atasha. Thirst will be something that will be found in the tents of Abu Abdullah. When they want water, they ask Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas to go and take some water. Sallallahu alayhi. In order to understand the musibah of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, you have to first understand the musibah of the thirst of the Ahlulbayt. Imagine on the hot plains of Karbala. The women and children in the tents of Abi Abdullah Al-Hussain, suffering of thirst on the day of Ashura. They say the last time Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas brought water was the night before Ashura. The little water that remained was made use of, and on the day of Ashura they had no water remaining. The battle begins between the Imam and the enemies of Abu Abdullah after the Fajr prayer. From the Fajr onwards, these women and children have not received any water. The sun comes out, the weather starts to heat up, no water is there. Try to understand Imam al-Hussain. Close to Dhuhr time, these many hours in the hot summer of Iraq, on the hot plains of Karbala, the women and children have not had any water. Even the grown men are sometimes maybe in hiding, complaining about water, about thirst. You can imagine what is happening to the women and children. The grown women may be even able to control their complaint for water. They may be able not to come to Imam al-Hussain and say, we're thirsty. But imagine those little ones. Sukaina and her friends are all thirsty. The small children in Karbala are all thirsty. They can't hide their thirst. They would be coming to their auntie Zainab, complaining about water. Imam al-Hussain seeing that. Imam al-Hussain seeing the cries of the children for water. Imagine what that does to the heart of Imam al-Hussain. He decides the tents need water, the women and children need water. Many of you may not have heard the story of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas in this way. Luhuf and others quote it in this way. They say Imam al-Hussain took Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Together they went towards the Sharia to bring water. I understand this in the following way. The women and children's thirst, Imam al-Hussain has heard for too long. He realizes he needs to get them water. These children may be dying. Ali al-Asghar needs water. They go towards the Sharia. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas and Imam al-Hussain together, fighting the enemies back to back. But what happens on the way is that when they're fighting the enemy, gradually Imam al-Hussain and Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas are separated. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas fights further and further. He moves towards the Sharia. He enters the Sharia after having fought that difficult battle, because the enemy wanted to make sure that the water doesn't go to the tents of Imam al-Hussain. Imagine Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas entering the Sharia with his horse, taking the water skin to get some water, feeling the cool touch of water.
If any of us was there, you would want to drink a bit of that water. History has reported he took a handful of water and brought it up to drink. فذكر عطش الحسين. How can I drink when Abu Abdullah al-Hussain is still thirsty? He pours the water back. He takes the water towards the tents of Imam al-Hussain. The enemy realizes the danger of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas getting back with that water. They ambush him from behind the trees. Imagine Qamar Bani Hashim, the tall son of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the brave son of Amir al-Mu'mineen, fighting the enemy, moving towards the tents of Imam al-Hussain. One of the enemy members sees that they're not able to stop him. Fighting in a manly way, they attack from behind him. They take a strike at the right arm of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. The call is heard, Wallahi in qata'tum yamini, inni uhami abadan an dini. But his worry is the water. He starts fighting with his left hand, probably trying to kick the horse harder. I wish you would get me to the tent sooner. It's okay if I've lost one hand, as long as I get the water to the tent. One of the enemy strikes the left hand of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas no longer has hands to fight. He has the water skin, they say, in his mouth, trying to work his way through the enemy. What kills the hopes of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is when they start throwing arrows. They say one arrow lands in the eye of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He's probably thinking that's okay as long as the water gets to the tents. But when another arrow pierces through the water skin, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas loses hope, probably thinking, what shall I say to Sukaina? I had promised her water. This is why some say he turned gradually away from the khiyam. But this was not the end. One of the mal'oon from behind Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas takes an iron rod and hits Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas on the head. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, this tall son of Amir al-Mu'mineen, is about to fall off the horse. Brothers and sisters, anytime you would want to fall from an elevation, you would use your hands to break your fall, so you won't land with your face first. But Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas has no arms. All I can say is that they heard a call, Ya Akha, Adrak Akhak. Oh brother, come and see your brother for the last time. Say Imam al-Hussain heard the call, he ran towards the mutilated body of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Imagine Imam al-Hussain on the body of Abbas. You were called Qamaru Bani Hashim. Your face was so wonderful. What have they done to your face? What have they done with your body? Imam al-Hussain got back up. He said, الآن انكسر ظهري. Imam al-Hussain lost his brother Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. The Imam is now all alone. He went back to the khiyam. Probably the children came to Imam al-Hussain, asking him, where is the water? Where is our uncle? Imam al-Hussain, I don't know how he could respond. I think the children realized the sadness of their father, Imam al-Hussain. They got their answer, probably wishing they never asked for water. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي